If this is your first time here, welcome. My name is Lindsay Lehr. I am the managing director of PCMI. And we hold these coffee chats every other week, routinely throughout the year to provide a space for mutual learning around the payments industry, mostly in Latin America. But as you all know, we're increasingly branching out into other regions. And today we'll be looking a little bit at the global P2P cross-border space. We'll get into that in a moment. But if this is your first time here, just a couple of guidelines to ensure a successful and productive conversation for all of us today. Please note, this is not a webinar, okay? This is a meeting intended to be open and participatory. So what does that mean? We recommend that you have your camera on, that your mic is on, and we invite you to jump in and participate at any time. You can raise your hand, you can just jump in, you can put a note in the chat, and we'll do our best to see that and call on you. But we want to hear your questions and also your perspective, right? If you have something, an insight to add or an anecdote or an example to add, we would love to hear from you and make this as interactive as possible. That being said, as we said, this is an open meeting. We invite our entire network, so you might have competitors, investors, journalists here present. And so you just want to keep that in mind when thinking about your participation. Okay, so thank you all for that quick intro. I'm very pleased today to introduce our wonderful friend and partner, Priscilla Doliveira from CrossTech. Priscilla, thank you so much for being with us. Tell us about yourself and about a little bit about CrossTech for those who are meeting you for the first time.
Hi, everyone. It's an honor to be here today and also to chat with Lindsay once again. While I do have my coffee, so we want to make sure that this is a coffee chat with real coffee. And I'm in
Absolutely.
Miami, so I have Cuban coffee. So for those who don't know. So my name is Priscilla Doliveira. I come from a background in the payment industry, specifically on credit card. I worked many years in American Express. From there, I managed US LATAM and also Europe and Asia. And outside of American Express, I was also able to move my skills into the education industry where I built digital products. So through my career, I always been kind of an innovator, looking for ways and industries that have a need. So somehow destiny brought me here. Now I join Ugo in CrossTech. Most of you here on this call know Ugo Cuevas more. He's our CEO and founder, where we used to be called IMTC, International Money Transfer Company. And as you know, that mostly took care of the regular traditional remittance companies around the world, specifically in US LATAM. And as the industry changed, Lindsay, you've been through this, and I know a lot of you, I've heard some familiar names like Veronica and Haido. We've seen the transformation of the industry from the regular money transmitters to other products and services. And at that moment, we said, this is a great time for us to innovate, change, and become a new name in the name of the industry. As you know, or for those who don't, we are not a researcher company. We're not a data company. We are a company that provides products and services to the industry and to our customers. So at that time, we said, instead of being called International Money Transfer Company, we want to be called CrossTech. We want to represent everyone in the industry, not only the traditional remittances, but the top service providers, the regulators, the compliance companies, the banking, and the crypto companies that are now integrating with the cross-border payments. So we decided in 2021, that was the tip of iceberg right after, the pandemic, to change our name to CrossTech. So that's why our name is CrossTech. I hope it gives you guys a little bit of context. And now I go into a little bit of what we do. So CrossTech, we are a consulting and conference company. Under the consulting services, we provide a variety of services. Here I'll mention the main service that we are focused on. Number one is licensing and regulatory assistant. So we help customers who are looking to get licenses in the countries, in the US, if they're looking in Canada or in other countries, we provide that service as well. We also help with risk assessments and other services for you to understand if you are in the right track on your compliance, if you do need any compliance opinions before you get the big auditors or even the regulators come to give you a visit. So that's one of the main services, and it's been a core value for us I don't know if you guys follow us, but in January this year, we launched an article about compliance. And one of my quotes was compliance is the beginning of everything. Because usually when you're a consulting company, the customers come to you when there is a problem, right? They come to you because, oh, the regulators are coming. This is the citation I got. What do I do now? And one of the things that we always focus on, hence we do our courses and our conferences, hence we do this regulatory, check-ins with most of our customers, is how do we ensure that we build a top-notch program from the beginning, especially when you are starting as a fintech, when you're starting as a top service provider, and you don't have a lot of structure, you don't have a bigger team, but you can't put together a risk assessment and a risk model that makes sense. So that way you're not in that dangerous situation. So that's a main service for us. The second service that we focus on is compliance management. So KYC, transaction monitor, is very important. We do have a lot of top service providers that we work with to provide you that service in case you don't feel what you have is good enough, or if you want our compliance experts to go in and take a look into what are you currently using and do an assessment if you should look for something better. So that's kind of the segment of applying for licensing, preparing a risk assessment, but understanding what you have and see if what you have is sufficient. Then we have bank
And
partnerships.
Priscilla, sorry to cut you off for a second, but that's in the US market primarily, or
Most of
other
it,
markets as well?
we do other markets as well. Most of our customers come to us in the US, I'm sure because we are in Miami and we drink Cuban coffee, but we do have also compliance partners in Canada, in the UK, and in other areas as well. So
Got
our
it.
services are worldwide, but currently most of our customers come for us for services in the US. Okay. Another big one, and I'm gonna focus on bank partnerships next because I think that's the one of the biggest services that we do, and I think it's a big gap in the industry now. If you are in cross-border payments, if you do send and receive internationally, you're not the typical customer-friendly client for a bank, right? And a lot of our customers, they do have multiple bank accounts with multiple banks at the same time, and they move their volumes accordingly to ensure that if there is any risk of their account being closed, you have a backup plan. So we do have bank partnerships that we work with you to ensure that you have the right banking needs that you have. I'm talking about settlement accounts here. I'm not talking about operational accounts because they're a little bit different. And we can help you set your company to be able to provide, a stable bank account relationships. Again, we are not a bank. We do not provide compliance approvals for you, but we do prepare you to have the correct business plan to explain yourself in the banking terms so the banks will understand your business model and take the risk to the business with you. Each bank have a specific requirement. So we do have some banks that are middle risk, some banks that are high risk, and we have some banks that are very API focused. So depending on what your business model is, we match you with the bank that fulfills your business needs. So that's something very important, I think, for the industry and for you as you're operating in this dynamic space. Another thing that I wanted to talk about here.
Priscilla, sorry,
Yeah.
I think this area is so interesting. When you're talking about banking partners, you're talking about a bank that will just give your company a bank account, right? You're not even
Yes.
talking about holding your customers' funds. You're just talking about banking your own company.
Yes.
And how that can be really difficult.
Yes. And especially because you're doing, big amounts, small amounts, different countries. And we do have some banks, for example, Lindsay, that they have a list of countries that they do not allow. So you're not able to do transactions within those countries. But again, each business model is different. Each risk model is different. If you are a cross-border payment country that are not technological, I do have banks that are in that system that can meet with you. And if you're looking for an API connection, we do have that as well. So it depends on what you're looking for. And I want to touch on that, Lindsay, beyond the services we do, but for the industry. As a cross-border payment voice, because I like to call us that, we struggle sometimes to bring banks to our conference because, again, this perception of being high risk, of doing high risk transactions, not every bank want to be linked to that. But I think in the last, I would say 10 years, we have done a little bit of progress, and we have attract different banks in the industry that are looking into get into the space. Most of them are mid-sized banks, community
Mhm.
banks, credit unions, but now you will see in CrossTech World that I don't want to give any surprises yet. We are starting to be approached by the bigger banks. But again, we are approached by them that there is an interest. But when I say, can we open a bank account for MSB, there is hesitation. So we are on that path of educating and showcasing to them that does not mean you're in cross-border. It means you're going to be high risk. If you have a good compliance program, if you have a good risk assessment, you are able to operate legitimately. So I wanted to make that point because building a bank community in the cross-border space is very difficult. So I invite you, all of you, to partner with me so we can continue to provide an opportunity for all of us. Then
Okay.
there is,
So can I
I love
jump
what
in
you
here?
said. Yeah, please go ahead, Nick.
Sorry.
it.
You mentioned the APIs are available. Is that for the cross-border payments?
yes.
You do it. You use APIs for that.
So we do have some banks that are connected to the API service. So if you have, let's say, a solution that you do digital cross-border payments, you're able to connect to that bank and be able to do the transactions through that connectivity. Yes.
Okay, because using APIs for payments is problematic,
Yes.
security-wise, massively. So I'm assuming you're aware of that and you're taking appropriate precautions on that, but that is not a very secure way of doing it.
Yes, again, like I said, when there is these introductions to these banks that provide those services, there is a compliance team, there is all the risk controls and assessments done prior to that connectivity to go live. So I'm not talking about here, we go in and in 1 month you're live. Sometimes this process can take up to 12 months. So it's a long process to be able to do coherently and within the compliance protocols.
I think it's really interesting what you mentioned, Priscilla, about community banks and credit unions, because it's funny. Increasingly at PCMI, we've been getting requests from clients that serve banks, like technology companies, and who are trying to put the light a little bit more on community banks because they're precisely the players that are a little bit more niche. They don't have the competitive advantages that the big players have, and so they have a little bit more freedom, possibly to take on more risk or to just develop a niched product offering. So I just think I've been hearing more and more about community banks and the importance of community banks and credit unions at providing this varied, the variation of services that we're needing. So I think that's fabulous to point out.
And again, I think an important point here is they're willing to hear it, but that doesn't mean that every business plan and business model is going to be approved. So they do have a set of criteria, a set of volume, a set of requirements to ensure that it's as risky as possible, as less risky as possible.
So I have a little bit of a more general question relating to community banks, credit unions. It's been a while since I've really been involved with them very much, but a while ago, pretty much none of them ran their own systems. It was far too expensive for them to do that. Has that changed? Because I really haven't looked at it much in the last 15 odd years.
What I've seen, Nick, is some of them, yes, they do have built their own systems. And in some cases, what I've seen is some of these community banks are becoming a little bit of technology company. Like the CEOs and the COOs who are running these operations are running with a technology mindset to be able to create their own systems and not have to depend on others. But they do also connect for certain services. So I think it's a mix, but I'm seeing more and more them becoming a technology bank.
Yeah, I see it similar. I think it's a slow trend, Nick. I think by and large, most of them are still quite antiquated and dependent on external service providers, but it's and of course the US has so like thousands of banks, so we can segment these, but there's a few that are really technology forward and see the opportunity and are moving in that direction.
Yeah, it was very strange when I moved to this country because I left a country that had like 5 banks.
Yeah.
That was it.
And here you
when I came
5,000
here,
banks. Exactly.
there were 40,000 of them when I moved over here. That was in the mid-90s. It's like, are you kidding me?
And I think
exactly. So,
and I think, Lindsay, to add, it's also everyone has this perception that the banks are archaic, that they live in the history, that they're not catching up. But as the payment industry is moving so fast, there is no other way. So I think they're going very slow because that's their norm, right? But they're becoming more and more technology with time.
Well, most of them outsourced all their services to Fiserv or something, an equivalent company, but they were certainly the big one. And so nothing happened unless Fiserv allowed it to happen. And I talked with them, and trying to get them to do anything was impossible. So it was always really slow to get anything done. But if they're starting to break away, doesn't necessarily mean all of their services, but I mean, they're certainly not going to manage their ATM network. That's a nightmare. But other services, they might start developing them themselves. And that's a really interesting pathway they're going down. I like it, actually, because now they can
it's
start.
It's an exciting trend. Yeah.
They can, because then they can start separating themselves. I'm losing the word here, but by showing that they're different from others, they can focus on what they want to offer specifically. They have the ability to do that at a technical level. So I like that.
Mm-hmm. And then I think I will go into the 2 next services that we do. Is one of them, we do referrals on white label solutions. If you're looking to expand into a new market and you don't want to build your own technology, you want to connect, we do have a few partners we work with, and we can introduce you to ensure you do a proper implementation. And you also do overall client and partner introduction. So not only on, remittances as a service products, we do have actually, it's a new division that we started the last 2 years, which is called M&A. Since we are the voice of the industry, we have a lot of customers that come to us and they say, okay, Priscilla, I need to go into Brazil. I need to go into Europe. Who should I partner with, or who should I buy so I don't have to establish my company from scratch? I prepared today, later on, after Lindsay goes through her slides, 10 trends that I've been hearing from my customers in the last year, and I will share with you guys some of my discoveries. But it's very linked to this. It ensures that there is a proper introduction. We usually introduce companies we know that it has implemented with our customers before. It had success stories. So there is so many solutions in the market today that the customers don't know what to choose. So using our expertise, we're able to filter that for our customers. So that's been very valuable, and it saves them time, and it really gives them a credible, reputable solution for them to focus on. So I think that's it for the slides, Lindsay. I think it gives them a good understanding of what we do. And I don't want this to be a commercial call, guys. This is just to share with you what we do and how can we help.
It's already opening up the understanding of trends and needs in the industry. Yes. So I think it's terrific. But one more announcement from you before we dive into our slides.
Perfect. So this, I wanted to invite every one of you to CrossTech World 2023. It's going to be at the Hard Rock Hotel, November 14th to the 16th. Our conference is very focused on cross-border payment. We are the only conference that is focused on cross-border payments only. Most of our companies that are there are top service providers, compliance providers for the KYC, the fraud management. We have some of the community banks, Nick, there. If you can join, that would be great, so I can introduce you to them. We also have the traditional remittance companies that are on the space, and we are now opening for fintechs and companies that are providing competitive advantage in the market and some technology solutions. We're expecting around 200 companies, 63 countries, around 500 attendees. So we hope to see everyone there. And I see some familiar names that are here that have registered already. So hopefully we can get some of you to be there with us too.
I will also be there. I'll be moderating a couple of panels. And I want to just introduce Anna as well on the CrossTech team, Anna Gonzalez, who's the head of content, who is helping. I work closely with Anna, on some articles that we contribute to CrossTech, and also working with her on the panel. So welcome, Anna.
Thank you, Lindsay, and thank you, everyone. It's great for CrossTech to be here for the first time. We're very excited. We just gave a very nice overview of what we do. And, you can explore all the different options that we can have to partner in the future. So I'm very happy, very honored to be in as well. I hope I can see some of you at CrossTech World. We can have some introductions and show you what are the different partnerships that we have with different key members of the industry. Happy to see Jairo again. Jairo has been a speaker for quite some time. Very happy to also see him and see new faces. Thank you, Lindsay.
Awesome. Thanks, Anna. Terrific. So thank you both for that intro. And what we're going to do today is discuss a couple of trends from our side. I think, PCMI and CrossTech work so well together because you guys are very operational. Your consulting business is very operationally focused, right? Like, how do I do this? How do I get licensed? Who do I partner with? And our services are much more, looking at the external environment, tracking trends, data, helping you get insights, right? So it's a very nice combo. But last week, some of you know, I presented at the Remit1 Innovation in Payments and Remittance Conference in London, which was a fantastic experience. It's focused more so on Europe and Africa, and Europe and Asia, Europe and Middle East corridors. So it was really fantastic for PCMI to be there and being exposed and sharing some trends on some new markets outside of Latin America. And what we did was just provide a little bit of global context of the shifting tide of global remittances, specifically in the competitive environment. So I'm just going to go through, not the whole presentation, but a few of the key slides that we shared. And then we'll go back to Priscilla to look at those trends that she mentioned at the beginning. So again, I'm going to blaze through these slides, but if you guys have comments or questions, just please interrupt me, jump in, feel free to get the conversation starting, right? So starting off is the fact that when we look at P2P remittances, okay, it's been a decades-old industry that has been slowly digitizing over time. But when we actually sat down to look at this data, it was kind of wonderfully coincidental to see that for the first time in history, in 2023, P2P remittances will be more than 50% digital for the first time ever. So this trend has been ramping up year over year. And when I say digital remittance, I mean digital from the sender side, right? So the sender, instead of going in to a brick and mortar location and paying in cash, they're actually paying digitally on an app or on their computer through a bank transfer, digital wallet, or some other type of digital payment. So today, the anticipated result for 2023 is that digital remittances will represent about 52% of all volume in a more than $700 billion industry. And so, we're seeing cash remittances really decline in share. That being said, there's still almost $400 billion in cash-based remittances. So there's kind of two ways to think about this industry. One is forward-thinking, forward-looking, and keeping pace with the trends that are shaping the industry. But at the same time, there's huge opportunity to still compete in the traditional business as we know it. Okay. Now, when we look at, some of the verticals, some of the corridors, you folks in Latin America very well know that Mexico is the primary corridor, about $60 billion just from the US to Mexico in 2023, which actually puts it as the number 2 vertical overall, right, globally. Here, this slide, we're just looking at flows to Asia and flows to Africa. India blowing everyone out of the water. India is increasingly becoming a global payments powerhouse. We've talked about this a little bit in some of our coffee chats with the launch of UPI now becoming a cross-border payment method as well. When you have 1 billion people, it's easy to be a global leader. And, we see that in remittances. The Indian diaspora being very powerful as well. And, China, about half of that, but right in between India and China is Mexico. So I don't want to miss that. Africa is also very interesting, much more fragmented, very difficult market, but together Africa and the Middle East representing about 100 billion in remittances each year. So thinking about this competitive landscape, right? This is what we do. We like to look at trends and who is winning and who is losing, and what can we observe about the competitive environment. When we look at remittances overall, right, this left chart, this kind of shows the breakdown. And we see MTOs, right? Money transmitter operators, traditional players representing just under half of the market, and banks another very sizable chunk. With fintechs and crypto having claimed a decent piece of the pie, but are still in the minority. Okay, and you know, that's for remittances overall, including cash remittances. Now, when we look at the digital remittances only, I was surprised actually to see that MTOs are actually the #1 player, meaning that the Western Unions, the MoneyGrams of the world, have actually done have been very proficient at making this transition to digital. Banks as well. So although banks have been eclipsed by fintechs. So fintechs, of course, are having a greater share of digital remittances than they do overall, meaning this is their strength, right? This is where they shine. But just due to their sheer size, scale, and their huge brand awareness, MTOs and their transition to digital has actually been very successful. And they are still the leaders even in this digital space. Okay. So what this year, you who follow us and follow our thought leadership know we've spent probably 75% of our coffee chats and other content this year focusing on real-time payments, domestic schemes that are disrupting the domestic landscape. But what is not talked about as much is how these domestic schemes are positioned to disrupt cross-border payments. And this is potentially paving the way to a completely new global cross-border payments paradigm. And so we'll talk about that for a moment. There's other innovations as well that are shifting these competitive landscape, including CBDCs, more long-term, but something we definitely need to be thinking about. And finally, the card networks, seeing these shifts taking place, and Visa Direct, MasterCard Send have been around for decades, but they're receiving new investment, right? Getting a facelift, receiving more attention, really being, if you listen to their earnings calls, you understand how important these products are to help them compete and stay relevant in a money transfer oriented industry. So I just want to touch on a little bit of these trends. You may have seen this slide before, real-time payment schemes. We're talking about domestic schemes, right? Real-time payment schemes led by central banks in most cases, or a conglomerate of private banks. And in a few cases, I mean, there's dozens and hundreds of private fintechs offering real-time payments in P2P, but few of them have scaled. But we do have a couple of them on the slide here, Venmo, for example. But by and large, it's the central banks, and in many cases, cooperation with a banking conglomerate that is pushing real-time payments forward. We see India and Brazil kind of by far the two leaders. India leading by transactions, Brazil PIX leading by volume. Okay, and so these are gaining so much scale and being consolidated among the population that they are starting to be positioned for cross-border payments, and we'll look at that a little bit in a moment. But to start off is to look at Africa, right? Africa is potentially the region that is furthest behind in the real-time payment trend, both domestically and cross-border. But when we're thinking about cross-border, when we're thinking about RTP schemes disrupting cross-border payments, we're thinking about intra-regional, right? Central banks are going to partner with other regional central banks to enable clusters of countries to start communicating with each other and sending money. And so to understand the potential of this, we might want to look at what those clusters are for remittances. So within Africa, we have about $19 to $20 billion being transferred within the region. Some of these that you see here are some of the major clusters. And there's about 8 different RTP regional collaborations taking place to enable cross-border payments. So I have a few slides that detail that. We're not going to get into that right now. We just don't have the time. But the point that we want to make here is that central banks in Africa see the inefficiency and the difficulty that exists transferring money within the region, and are actively trying to solve this. We have some schemes that are live, although not yet scaling. There's still a lot of inefficiencies and cost issues and difficulties there. But this is a trend that is taking place in the region. Okay. Asia is a little bit more developed, and to be expected with very strong governments. We have a very strong culture around some of these regional conglomerates of markets, and very regulator-led payments landscape in a lot of these markets. And so here are the top intra-Asia corridors. Again, you see India in 3 of these corridors. So they're going to be a key player when we're talking about cross-border. And the Middle East is also a very important player when we're talking about domestic schemes moving to cross-border. And we already have live schemes, right? We already have live cross-border payments between these markets that are sponsored by central banks. Okay, so UPI is the top one, already directly integrated with PayNow in Singapore, and we have other integrations with these countries here already listed. And in this IPR event, we talked so much about fees and how everyone wants fees to come down, and that's the goal, and that's the opportunity, is reducing fees. And the World Bank has set this, international agenda that cross-border remittance fees come down to 3%. Right now, the average is around 6%. We learned in that event. And we're still 3 percentage points away from that global average. And what I find kind of funny is that, the World Bank provides these prescriptions, but they don't provide any recommendations. They don't give any indication of how to do this. And they also don't mention that by having the price to send money, that requires disruption, and disruption puts companies out of business. That's the nature of disruption. It also creates new businesses, but it takes out players who are inefficient and expensive. And so that's what I actually see these schemes working to do. UPI, for domestic P2P is free. It's already causing huge disruption and inability to grow of schemes that have any kind of monetization in them. And now that's going to be moving into the cross-border space. And actually, we did some research to figure out what do these cross-border payments cost? And the lowest that we found from the lowest, banking provider enabling UPI was 2.4% for a cross-border payment, which is, decently below the World Bank target and far below the global average. And so the more that these schemes gain traction and gain scale, the more difficult it's going to be for the private market to compete. Remember, these are government, state-sponsored, subsidized, low-cost payment rails. And so while they bring immense benefits in terms of financial inclusion and efficiency of payments, it's also creating, to some extent, unfair subsidized competition for the private sector. So I think that's just a fascinating phenomenon. We spent a lot of time talking about that at the IPR event last week. And this is something that we will expect to see consolidate more and more. Okay. Now, on the African continent, as I said, we don't see this happening as aggressively. We see more so fragmentation. And what does fragmentation do? It creates opportunity for private sector innovation. And so we're seeing homegrown fintechs coming out of Africa, working on innovative ways to move money in specific corridors over here on the left. And we're also seeing a lot of opportunity for blockchain and crypto solutions. Just like in Latin America, we've seen specific use cases for crypto in Argentina, for example, where it's difficult to access foreign exchange, or it's difficult to make cross-border payments, where inflation is really problematic. We're seeing more and more blockchain and crypto solutions oriented at the most difficult corridors, right? At the average price, Africa is the most expensive region in the world to send money to, at over 8% on average. And so here, in the absence of big, powerful solutions coming from regulators, we see a lot of private sector solutions and the most disruptive and forward-thinking technology out there. Okay. So all of this that I'm referring to, especially when we're talking about our real-time payments coming from central banks, what is that doing but essentially opening the door to central bank digital currencies? Why is this? Because as we know, blockchain is good at cross-border payments and making international money movement more efficient, right? Cutting out some of the intermediaries, the cost, and the time required that when you go through the correspondent banking system. And so with the central bank, first of all, getting very strong in domestic payments, then enabling cross-border payments, that positions them very well to now roll out a CBDC. And we're seeing this is very early days, but we're seeing it already take place in Brazil. For example, they've named and coined their CBDC Drex, the digital real. And already in their pilot program, they were starting to test cross-border transfers between Brazil and Colombia, not having to transfer into dollars first, but directly from the real to the Colombian peso. Again, India, we're seeing there's already digital rupee pilots out there, interoperability between fiat rupees and digital rupees, still in early phase, but we do see banks making this available to consumers already in certain pilot examples. The US, behind when we talk about regulator-driven initiatives, which is very typical for the US, but there's a lot of conversation around it, some pilots and some conversations with Western Union, just understanding that this can be very, and it's not surprising that it's kind of private sector based, right? Testing this within the confines of a leading company to see how this can be applied to improve cross-border payments. Okay, and I think maybe the most advanced, example here is which is actually a live system taking place, is the mBridge project, which was an initiative between China, Hong Kong, Thailand, and the UAE to enable CBDCs at the wholesale level to make wholesale transactions for banks and corporate clients. Again, the actual presentation has more detail on that, and I can make that available to anyone who's interested how that works. But they basically built an infrastructure to enable wholesale transactions between these markets using central bank digital currencies. Again, with the thought to reduce inefficiencies, speed transfers up, increase security, and make it better for everyone. And more than anything, have it be under the auspices of regulators. Okay. And then, so that's kind of discussing digital trends, what's going on in the digital remittance and these competitive trends that we will see change the industry over the next decade, most likely. But remember, as we said, cash is still very strong. And we talked about a nearly $400 billion market for cash remittances on the sender side. That doesn't even take into account the receiver side, right? I might send a digital remittance from the US to someone in Mexico who is picking that money up in cash. So the receiver side is much less researched and documented, but we know that cash on the receiver side is higher than on the sender side. So we have huge opportunities still to improve remittances in cash and continue to move that cash volume into the digital space. But anyway, where is cash still really powerful and really important culturally, right? This slide is based on the World Bank Findex data in terms of what we're seeing here are the markets in the world with less than 60% financial account penetration. Why 60%? In our studying of Latin America over the years, we started to see that, okay, smartphone penetration reaches 50%. That's like critical mass for digital behavior in general. But we don't really see digital payments start to accelerate until over half of the population is banked, either by a traditional bank or a fintech or a wallet, 60 to 70%. And so here are the markets that are still under that 60% threshold. Notice that Mexico is included here. Almost all of Africa, a good chunk of the Middle East, and some key markets in Asia, like Indonesia, one of the most populous countries in the world. So we can see that there's still major opportunity to have really smart, intelligent cash-based strategies. Okay. And another way to look at this is we just looked at penetration of financial accounts, but we also can think about penetration of adults who have made a digital payment. And so we see, just interestingly, countries here, right? Morocco, Egypt, and Nepal, still under 20% of people have made a digital payment. And so thinking about the strategy you want to have when you're sending money to these markets is going to be very important. 20 to 40%, surprisingly, India is here, despite the mass adoption of UPI, which, despite how huge UPI is in terms of transactions, only 30% of the population is using UPI. So there's still huge gaps here. And then we go up from here. So it's just, I refer to the World Bank FinTechs as a remarkable tool to understand kind of these trends on a global level. I'm going to skip this slide so we can jump into our conclusions and get to our trends that Priscilla is going to mention. But basically, we ended this conversation last week with 4 key takeaways, right? We're headed into an environment in which governments are not only the payment regulators, but direct competitors. We see this already happening domestically, and we can expect that to happen in the cross-border world as well. Okay, this is setting the foundation for the widespread deployment of CBDCs. We don't have any specific recommendation for you. It's too early to really track that, other than be prepared, be aware, be educated, and really start investing your innovative thinking and understanding how CBDCs are going to be rolled out in your market. One thing that is just a reality that we all have to face is that remittance industry, and really payments in general, is in an aggressive race to the bottom, meaning everyone is trying to compete on costs, and that's just driving fees downward around the world. And we've seen very little business model innovation. Okay, great. You're cutting fees, so maybe you'll get more customers, but that's going to continue happening. Someone's going to undercut you. How are you innovating to add new value, right, as fees drop to near zero? And then finally, as we said, there's still massive opportunity, $400 billion worth, to continue to solve age-old problems of cost, long settlement time, poor user experience in remittances. So mainstream digital solutions still have a long runway. These trends are not disrupting the industry overnight. Okay, so I thought that was a fantastic discussion we had last week. I was excited to share some of that with you. It's not so pertinent to Latin America. Hopefully this is opening your mind though to some global trends. And we'll invite Priscilla to comment on that and also talk through to the trends that she's observing. And also, guys, again, please jump in with your own observations. So on to you, Priscilla.
Thank you, Lindsay. And the beauty of this is that I haven't seen, the slides she was going to put it in here. And there is some, some trends that are similar. So I'm going to repeat some of the things that you mentioned. So I think the number one trend that I hear from my customers, I've been hearing as I'm going to conferences around the world and having, multiple conversation, is the M&A is a new trend within multiple companies. Companies are looking more to buy versus build. And I wanted to say this in both areas. So we see the companies that are looking to grow and they want to take on new territory, and they're looking to purchase companies that are already established, that has a healthy customer base, that has similar cultural values. We keep seeing that as a trend in the industry, but also we're seeing the other side, the regular traditional remittances that have good volume, have good presence, but they need cash infusion to be able to grow at the same speed as everyone else. So I think this is a very important point to mention, because sometimes when we talk about M&A, we always think about, okay, I'm gonna buy versus build, but I don't look at myself and say, okay, now it's my time to be bought, right? So I can compete at the same level. So I wanted to make that point very clearly. So that's my number one trend. My number two trend is the beginning of crypto integration in traditional money transmitters. For us in CrossTech, still when we were IMTC, we've been trying to bring the crypto mindset to the money traditional for the last 5 years. And now we are finally seeing some of that integrations. So it's really nice for us to see. I was in London and I was in a talk with MoneyGram, and they were mentioning that they are providing that service to some of their customers due to the identification of millennials in the industry, in where they feel that that's going to be the future, and they're testing, they're piloting, and they have seen good results. So that's something for us that we want to see more money transmitters to be taking on that approach. So that way you're able to expand, send and receive, not only to traditional cash, traditional digital, but also through crypto. So that's a trend that that I love to see in action, that we've been trying to push that trend in the last
Oops.
3 years.
And Priscilla, have you seen this go down, right? With the kind of collapse of Bitcoin, we've just seen investment and activity in crypto go down. How are you seeing that in the cross-border space?
I see that, yes, we got a little bit of trend that people were excited, they wanted to do it. And then when the collapse happened, people are again skeptical, but then it's volatile, right? Lindsay, I can't say it has keep going down, because then you see the examples like MoneyGram that they invested, they're on it, they're going to move forward. And I think it's kind of the risk analysis you have to do as a company. You want to have time to market, you want to be able to send and receive, but you have to incorporate the new methods. And of course, and I talk about compliance in my trend, I think it's number 6, is of course, crypto is still unknown in a lot of things, and it requires a lot of education. So my advice to companies that we say is, let's go slow. Let's build the compliance team you need so you're able to do it correctly. But yes, it did take a deep dive, but I think now it's going back up.
Got it.
Can you hear me well? My thing disconnected. Okay, so number 3 is business payment is evolving into the P2P space and also position themselves very strongly in cross-border payments. For us in CrossTech, we launched actually our first edition of conference this year in the beginning of the year, where we talk about business payments as a core business. And I think we have key players even here on the call, Heido from Paysend, and the Pioneers, the Flywires, and also the regular P2P companies that are launching B2B products. So I still keep seeing that as a new trend. In our event, we had Uniteller mention their new product. It was a new business payment that they're launching. And I think I'm gonna see more and more of that trend happening in the industry. Business payments, more volume, you're not competing for the 1% fee, and you're able to grow in a much bigger scale. So we see that as a new big movement for the cross-border payment industry.
Priscilla, do you see that as maybe a response? So P2P, like Uniteller, right? Companies that are traditionally focused on P2P moving into business, is that perhaps a response to kind of fees in the P2P space going down, more commoditization of P2P payments, and now, I might have more opportunity over here?
I see it more an expansion of services, right? If you're a company that are established in the P2P space, that have a decent volume, that have a lot of markets, and you need to expand your services to other areas, what is the new trends that are coming? And it's similar to the crypto example, right? You are doing cash, you're doing digital, and now you're going to do crypto. If you are established company doing P2P so well, what other services can you provide to capture different models? So I think it's a strategy move, and I think it's something that everyone on the space should be looking at as an opportunity.
Perfect.
The number 4 is Africa, and Africa is on top of the iceberg and is a new corridor. And I love to see your presentation explaining the opportunity within Africa and how it is a market that, it's been around for a long time, and a lot of people are doing the intra volume within Africa, but I think we are seeing migration to and from LATAM, and we are seeing a new interest from our clients to be participant of that corridor. And that's something that I've seen in the last, I'll say 12 months. And I see an increase of that interest, throughout the year. So I do feel like we mentioned in London, because I was participating and I was leading and moderating a panel in Africa, is the future is bright. I think each company mentioned, sitting on my panel, that phrase. And how are you able to understand the market, maneuver the market through the local presence that it's already established, and some really good, top service providers that are available already in the country for you to be connected and for you to tackle that volume. So I think it's another new opportunity that we see, and you should be looking into if you're part of the US LATAM market. 5, I think this one, everybody on the call is gonna agree and hopefully nod their heads, is there is a fintech overpopulation position, lots of competition, making the market overcrowded. And I wrote this very carefully because I don't want to sound negative, because I'm very open for new fintechs, for new companies to provide the competitive advantage that the market needs. But I believe that now there is so many companies out there that calls themselves fintechs, that calls themselves solving a product. And then when you go analyze what that company really does or what technology they really have and what is the funding behind it, it could be skeptical. So my point is if you're looking into, growing your business, connecting with a fintech or providing a segment for fintechs, let's just be very careful in how you filter and how you position, because the market now is very overcrowded.
Yeah, I think a key theme that we saw in the event last week was a key theme, right? That there's oversaturation. And if you're going to come into a market, you better have a very clear differentiation. Otherwise, it's going to be difficult for you. So that was definitely something we heard over and over.
And I think we see that, Lindsay, in the Africa corridor, we see in the US, you see in Latam, it's a global issue. And I don't want to say issue, it's a global solution, because we do want to have the solution, but having experts like CrossTech and like your own teams knowing your products, do that due diligence to ensure you know where you're getting into is very important. Number 6 is compliance is the core of everything and must be built from the beginning. And this goes very well with what I said in the beginning, some of the services we do, but also in how do you establish your company with the right risk assessment, with the right regulatory support to ensure you're doing things correctly. And even if you are in areas that still regulation is not established, like the crypto example, that we're still in the building process. And even the instant payments, like for the US, FedNow just launched now, while in Brazil, it's been 2 years and now it's the biggest. So, but there are forums that you can work with us. And we also participate in a regulator forum in Portland. I was there this year, where we are able to voice these concerns to the regulator, so it's top of mind. So my advice here is, and think of the opportunities. Even if the regulation is not ready, there are channels that we can help you position your concerns, so we can come with regular resolutions. Like, for example, we pushed crypto 5 years ago, and now companies are implementing crypto. So partner with us, and we'll be happy to help you set up your company properly. Okay. Number 7 is, I think this is very important. I keep hearing this every conference I go, every conversation I have, and even for my customers. The cost, and you mentioned too on your conclusion, Lindsay, is cost competition continues to increase, and new competitive advantage needs to be built to have user adoption. And this goes into cost of remittances keeps getting lower and lower. Competition keeps getting, you're fighting for 1 penny, right? But who is going to stick with you is the customers, because you have the right product, right customer service, and right competitive advantage. So being able to think about your business model that way is going to really position you to be the top choice for your customer. And that goes beyond, cost. And if cost is a commodity, what are you putting on the table so the customers are going to continue to be with you? And I think it's also linked with number 5, right? Because this fintechs, yes, it's overcrowded, but if you're able to find the fintech that has the competitive advantage that you need, and you're able, let's say, to build versus to buy versus build, you can be the top player in the market. So it's being able to link those trends together to really build the strategy that you're looking for. Then I have number 8 is partnerships. Partnership is a key theme in every conversation I have in cross-border. And here focus mostly specifically in white label and API integration to deliver time to market opportunity. And this goes not only for the traditional pay and send and pay and receive, but also if you're looking for e-commerce capabilities and different areas of how to do payment integrations, you should look for white label and API instead of building the product yourself. That's a trend that it's working well. We've seen great results, and something that I definitely recommend. Number 9, real-time payments. So again, Lindsay, our slides are matching here. Is real-time payment has many success stories. We launched CrossTech Latam last year in Brazil, right when Pix was at the verge. We had the Central Bank of Brazil presenting. regulators discussing, and also Matera, I don't know if you guys are familiar, which is the infrastructure behind PECs, was also there to explain the build out of the system. And it was very important for us to see now the FedNow movement in the US, which is very delayed compared to other countries. But we believe that real-time payments is a thing, not only in domestic, but also in international. We started to see new solutions, even for business payments, that move payments instead of SWIFT, but through a real-time payment account settlement opportunity. So that's something that we're seeing throughout cross-border payments, not necessarily only through the instant deposit for within the same countries. So it's here to stay. It's just a matter of, can you catch up quick enough? Like that movie from Leonardo DiCaprio, right? Catch me if you can. I love to use that phrase because I think that for our industry, that's what's happening. Everybody's running, and if you don't run fast enough, you're not gonna make it. And then the last trend is number 10 is banks. Nick, this one is for you. Traditional bank partners with fintechs to ride on the new trend. So we're seeing this as, it's happening. The banks are starting to learn more about cross-border payments. They want to be part of it. Of course, the bigger the bank, the more compliance, the more risk assessments, and the more is being skeptical. But I think it's a matter of education and understanding. And that's why CrossTech, Priscilla, I partner with Lindsay, with Daniel Weber from Maxi Intelligence, with, key researchers in the industry to really be able to provide this education, not only to our customers, but also to the regulators, to the banks, to the partners that are there to really open this wave for us to be able to do business. So again, these are trends from CrossTech, from what I see with my conversations with customers and the consulting services that they hire and they want to partner with us. I hope you thought it was helpful, and I'll pass it back to you, Lindsay.
So I want to jump in here. Something that's really interesting is relating to what you're saying is if a company can grab customers very easily, then you can lose them just as easily. So you've got two different things at play here. You've got to find a way of getting customers and then find a different way of keeping them. And that's going to be the game long term. If you have all these fintechs, that's actually great, but you need to be, because there's so many, you need to be really narrowing what is it that you have to offer? What is it that distinguishes you from everybody else? And then how do you keep your customers long term? And that may be partnering with other fintechs, like we offer this and you offer that. Let's sync our systems together so that now there's no reason for them to go anywhere else. So I like that. I like the trends.
I love it. Yeah, Nick, that's a key. When a country is facing the possibility of a real-time payment scheme, the incumbents get scared because it's like, oh, people can transfer money out of my account faster than ever. It also means that they can gain customers, or competitors can gain customers, and it just speeds up competition, honestly. So that's a great point. We're starting to see that move into cross-border. So, well, Priscilla, thank you so much. I want to just really appreciate you and Anna and your sharing your wisdom with us. Again, an invitation to all of you to look into CrossTech World in November. I will be there. Many of you on the call I know will be there. So we look forward to that event. And please join us back here in 2 weeks. Whoops, I just messed up my presentation. But 2 weeks, October 16th, it will be our next coffee chat. So we look forward to seeing you guys there. And I received several questions. The slides will be shared in our portal. So if you don't have access to that, you should all have access. If you don't, you can contact us and we'll help you get access. And the recording will be uploaded to our YouTube page, so you'll have access to these resources. And I of course encourage you to reach out to Priscilla and to Anna directly for more questions. So thank you all. Priscilla, great to see you. Great to have you with us, and we'll connect with all of you soon.